Donald Trump and the all-around safety of the American people just scored a major victory.
Well, we begin here at 4 with some breaking news. In just the past 15 minutes, Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts temporarily pausing a judge's order that required a deported Maryland man to be returned to the U.S. by tonight. It means, for now, Kilmar Abrego Garcia will not be coming back to the United States.
So this is part of the major developments in the case Fox 5 has stayed ahead of from the very start.
Let's get to Chief Legal Correspondent Katie Barlow live outside the Supreme Court with the latest details. Katie?
Hey, good evening, ladies. As you said, just about 15 minutes ago, Chief Justice John Roberts issued what's called an administrative stay. It's a temporary pause that kind of freezes everything in place and stays or pauses Judge Paul Lazinis's order that would have required Kilmar Abrego Garcia to be returned to the United States by midnight tonight. This comes as the Department of Justice asked the Supreme Court to step in here and put that pause order in place. Now, the chief got this request because he's actually in charge of requests that come up from the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, overseeing cases out of Maryland. And basically what happens now is he will refer the matter to the full court for consideration. And they seem to be interested in moving quickly here, sensitive to the timeline, because the Chief Justice called for a response by 5 o'clock tomorrow. But it turns out Abrego Garcia's legal team didn't need that long, because just minutes ago, they filed their response to the Department of Justice saying that this order should be allowed to go forward and that Abrego Garcia should be returned by midnight tonight in their filing. They called this a case one of one. This is a one-off, essentially, where the government admitted a mistake in deporting Abrego Garcia to his home country of El Salvador when there was an order from an immigration judge saying specifically that he cannot be deported to El Salvador. So right now, that means the full court will consider both sides' responses, and now we will see how long it takes the court, now that they have heard from both sides, to make this decision.
And of course, because Democrats and liberals have become so radicalized, they have been crying and demanding because they want these drug cartel members, rapists, and murderers to be allowed back into our country.
But Judge Boasberg told him that if you got the means to unlawfully deport someone, you find the means to bring them back. So now they're calling Judge Boasberg a radical left rogue judge. The problem is he was appointed to the bench first by President Bush.
So at least for the moment, this criminal who was here illegally, and for all you liberals living in another reality other than the one that's real, almost all these illegal immigrants aren't just criminals because they came here illegally. That's just one issue. The other issue is that they're actually committing crimes like murder and rape. As for the man that caused this outrage, it's over the fact that they are trying to say he can't be deported because he is afraid he'll be killed by a rival gang. I'm sorry, but that's not a reason for you to come here. You chose a life of crime, and now you have to deal with the consequences. The fact that he was deported to the wrong country, well, if he was truly in fear for his life, then he should be happy he was sent to another country than the one he came from. Of course, this story would not be complete without MSNBC crying racism. They get rid of that bigot Joy Reid, and it still remains status quo at MSNBC.
I don't know what it's going to take for the American people, for 78 million Americans, to deal with what motivated them to make the choice to elect this man again, to make the choice that will allow these people to undermine every fundamental assumption we have, that you can just be disappeared, and then they can argue that, a court is getting in the way of their ability to exercise, foreign policy in some ways, right? I don't know what it's going to take for 78 million Americans to deal with what motivated them to make this choice. And the choice that they've made, we have to just be honest, is to literally throw the Republic into the trash bin. And this is just one example. The tariffs is another, right? They made the choice. Now, what was behind it? We have to grapple with it, because it's the snake, it's the beast coiled up in the heart, the bosom of the country, as Frederick Douglass said. And the fact that they are doubling down on this shows you what kind of human beings they actually are.
Say more.
We chose a felon who is more interested in loyalty, who's more interested in retribution, who's more interested in grift than in democracy. And we chose a felon because we didn't want to elect a black woman. So to read that, to actually explicate that, is to say we would rather destroy the republic than for that to have happened. And until we grapple with it, there's no amount of protesting I could do. There's no amount of resistance that could come into play to actually force 78 million people to grapple with what motivated them to put themselves in this position.
And I think you're getting at how we're going to have to go through the next 4 years, right? Because I haven't on this show covered the talk of a third term, because I believe it's a shiny object. I believe the things driving Trump's approval rating down are the man-made destruction of the economy, abandoning due process. But you're right in that 78 million people voted for someone who wants to shred the Constitution. Why?
That's the key.
What's the answer?
There is a sense in which the underbelly of the country, what Melville was writing about, right? That there's this sense, this tragic dimension of the American project, where the extension of basic democratic principles, the idea that dignity and standing should be accorded to anyone, no matter their gender, no matter where they're from, no matter their color, that has been challenged because some people believe that by definition they ought to be superior to others, and that the country should be organized in such a way to ensure that fact. And we have been willing to do monstrous things in defense of it. Monstrous things. And people have been using it in some ways, Nicole, for their own self-interest. They might not be monsters in that sense, but they might be unabashedly greedy. They just want to make money with and exploit people's grievances and hatreds in the way. But we've been dealing with this from the very beginning.
In all seriousness, these people literally make me sick. You're trying to say, well, you voted for Trump and now you're seeing what you get. Yeah, my eyes are wide open. He's doing everything he said he would. And until he does otherwise, I'm behind Trump 100%. And it has zero to do with feeling superior to anyone else. People didn't vote for Trump because they did not want to vote for a black woman as our president. Me and other people like me would be more than happy to vote for a black woman as president. We're just not going to vote for a communist, liberal, alcoholic moron.
The Supreme Court has decided to allow President Trump to resume deportations of alleged Venezuelan gang members under the Alien Enemies Act. This comes on the heel of the court pausing a lower court order requiring the Trump administration to return a wrongly deported Maryland man by midnight tonight. Devin Dwyer covers the courts and joins us now. Devin, break down that Alien Enemies Act for us.
Some significant news from the court tonight, Lindsay, in a 5-4 decision, as you said, allowing the president to resume deportations of alleged Venezuelan gang members under the Alien Enemies Act. That's that wartime act from 1798 that was last used during World War II to inter Japanese Americans. Remember, this was the law that the president used to send 2 plane loads of alleged gang members to El Salvador a couple weeks ago. Many of those members on those planes, Lindsay, received no due process. They didn't have a chance to challenge their detention, much less their removal. Many of them said they weren't even gang members. Most of them did not have criminal records. They challenged in federal district court in Washington the illegality of this. Of course, Judge Boasberg, the district judge who's overseen that case, has been a target of President Trump and other allies, putting that restraining order on those flights, halting them temporarily. And a short time ago, Lindsay, the Supreme Court, now overruling Judge Boasberg, says basically that those challengers brought their challenge in the wrong courthouse. This was a decision based largely on jurisdiction rather than substance. It was 5-4. The 4 dissenting justices were the 3 liberal justices and conservative Justice Amy Coney Barrett. But what this means in practice, Lindsay, is that the Trump administration can now use this wartime act to expedite removals of Venezuelans. That said, the Supreme Court, interestingly, did plant a flag for due process. While the court sided with President Trump, they made clear that anyone detained and put on an airplane to El Salvador has to first be given notice, and second, has to be given a reasonable amount of time. That's the court's words, to challenge their removal to another country before they can be sent south. So that is sort of a bit of a hedge on Trump's power here. But make no mistake, this is a significant win for the president, and one that is being lamented tonight by the conservative justices. Justice Sotomayor, in a dissent, said that the government's conduct in this case, sending those airplanes south with those migrants a couple weeks ago with no due process, she calls it an extraordinary threat to the rule of law. And she says the Supreme Court tonight has violated the best traditions of this country, and that is why the court's so narrowly divided in the dissent in this case, Lindsay.
Devin, before we let you go, let's talk about Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the Maryland man who was wrongly deported to El Salvador. What does this mean for him?
Well, it means that he will remain there now for the time being with this administrative stay in this case. Now, we should say, as you said at the top, that the Supreme Court has not yet taken a position on whether or not the government needs to bring him back. But the fact is that any delay, if he is wrongly, being held there, is significant to him and his family, and certainly an affront to the rule of law. The government, in this case, does not contest the facts. It was a mistake that this man from El Salvador, who, was out freely, approved by a court in the United States, was swept up recently and sent south, that was all a mistake. But the real question now, Lindsay, is what is the government going to do about it? The Trump administration has not offered an answer to the court. The court put a deadline for tonight. The Supreme Court said maybe that was too aggressive. They hit pause. And so they're going to try to decide what they're going to do in this case. I expect some action from the Supreme Court later this week. But in the meantime, that gentleman, Mr. Garcia, is still in El Salvador, a place, by the way, Lindsay, that a federal judge said he should not be sent because of fear of persecution because of who he is.
All right. Very interesting there. Devin Dwyer, our thanks to you.
I think it's funny that when the courts rule in their favor, they start screaming, "You can't go against the courts." But when the courts rule against them, they want to go against judges' orders. I'll make you a deal. We will follow the rules for deportation when they follow the rules required to come into this country. Exception for rapists and murderers. That means they're automatically deported, or they'll spend the rest of their life in jail. Now, if you made it to the end of this video, I'd love to hear what you think. Please consider liking and subscribing. It really helps to grow the channel. Leave a comment down below, and I'll catch you guys next time.